reach beyond the darkness, beyond the grave, to an unexplored dimension as we travel to the mysterious realm of ghosts. Journey with us into the world of ghost stories. Hello, I'm Patrick McNee. You know the eerie feeling you get walking through an old deserted graveyard? Your hair stands on end. And unintentionally, you keep looking behind you. Now you're ready to join me as we bring you an hour of spine-chilling tales. Leave conventional logic behind as we enter a fascinating and unknown realm of ghost stories.
The Tower of London. Well, there are some spine-chilling tales to tell you about that one.
The visions that are reported in the Orontier mansion are always described as a young woman in a white dress.
She's really been not a scary ghost, but a mischievous ghost.
For centuries, these walls have soaked up the sounds of torture, execution, murder, suicide, and grief. And today, dark cries still echo through every spiral in the Tower of London, perhaps as a grave reminder that our past is still with us. There's the theory that ghosts are inconsolable spirits, reliving moments of intense emotional impact, almost as if they are trapped in some bizarre time lapse. Growing up in England, ghost stories become a part of life. With a long and bloody history stretching over 900 years, the Tower of London is the perfect setting for some of the most famous hauntings in the world.
The Tower of London. Oh dear. Well, there are some spine-chilling tales to tell you about that one. You know, you really can't expect anything else with all the murders and the suicides and the executions. The place was a regular bloodbath.
On record, there are 2,900 names of prisoners who were held in the tower over the centuries, from royalty to paupers. Heavy footsteps sounding through empty hallways, headless figures floating around, and sudden gusts of wind whipping through where there are no open doors or windows. Hair-raising accounts which leave a chill in the air and your heart in your throat. Inside the White Tower, the torture chamber, where the wretched were tormented and ultimately left to die horrid deaths.
The guards who patrol the tower at night claim to have heard agonizing screams echoing through the doors of the White Tower. They say it could only be Anne Askew. Well, who knows? Maybe it is.
Accused of witchcraft centuries ago, Anne Askew was brought to this hellhole. In order to get her to confess her crimes, her body was almost torn apart on the rack. Eventually, she died, her screams the only testimonial of her suffering. Earning its name through the countless murders committed here over centuries, the Bloody Tower is still haunted today. Most famous of all is the 15th century murder of the two young princes, who've been sighted strolling hand in hand, a grim reminder of their brutal deaths. Their story is a sad one. Terrified of the two princes' claim to the throne, King Richard III secretly ordered their killings. And one night, while the two brothers were sleeping, they were strangled in their beds. Their bodies were hastily buried, first in the basement of the Wakefield Tower, and then at the foot of a staircase. Another place where victims were brought to their knees with merciless torture is the Queen's house. Witnesses have claimed to hear the grinding sounds of the torture rack. And of course, the screams. Always the screams. It is here, in the Queen's house, where the famous Anne Boleyn spent her final days. As the second wife of King Henry VIII, Anne was executed in order for the king to marry Jane Seymour.
Anne Boleyn, by all accounts, was a peculiar woman. She had 6 fingers on one of her hands and 6 toes on one of her feet. In those days, this surely would have been regarded as an evil omen.
King Henry VIII, of course, fell in love with Jane Seymour, and because the Catholic Church condemned divorces, the king's only way out of his marriage to Anne Boleyn was to have her beheaded. After her death, the room where Anne awaited her execution has been described as having an unpleasant and menacing atmosphere. Some witnesses even described a peculiar perfume and a feeling of suffocation.
Anne Boleyn has also been spotted at the window, forever staring at something, maybe someone. One of the most incredible anecdotes is the one of the talking head, appearing from nowhere, rambling on endlessly. I don't think anybody's been able to put a history behind that one. I don't think anybody's brave enough to stay long enough to find out.
In folklore, ravens are birds that manifest bad omens. But here at the Tower, they are ever present, for quite the opposite reason. It all started when King Charles II ordered the ravens to be removed from the Tower, because their screeching drove him up the wall.
It was the king's astrologer that intervened. He predicted that if the ravens were chased away, the Tower would fall, and along with that, the English monarchy.
Today, the ravens are still at the Tower, their wings painlessly clipped so that tradition could linger. In the courtyard, there's even the Raven Cemetery. Perhaps there was some truth to the prediction. The monarchy still stands, so does the Tower, with its ghosts. Strange hauntings are not only housed within these Tower walls, or even within this country. History is filled with legends of those who came back from the grave to seek their revenge. Our next story takes us to a small town in Mexico where a brutal murder unleashes just such a haunting. The town of El Fuerte in Sinaloa, Mexico, was a quiet place back in the 1800s. It looked like many other colonial towns in the area. With its lovely plaza in the center of town, the one thing that set El Fuerte apart was the Orontia mansion, conspicuously located at the edge of the plaza. It was a huge structure, occupying nearly a full city block. It was lavishly decorated with furnishings from around the world, a chandelier from Italy, furniture from Vienna. It was built to the discerning taste of the wealthiest man in the state, Francisco Camilo Orontia. In 1869, he died, leaving the house and his fortune to his only heir, 18-year-old Adelaida. With all this wealth, you would think the beautiful young woman would have a perfect life. But instead, it seemed that Adelaida was too preoccupied with protecting her fortune for anything else. She became eccentric, withdrawn, antisocial, and so she ended up a lonely spinster in the huge house, rarely venturing outside as the years went by. Then, on September the 26th, 1927, the life of Adelaida took a violent turn. As she slept in her bed, she was brutally murdered. The fortune which had brought her all the luxuries of life was the cause of her death. Her trusted maid, Elisa, confessed to killing Adelaida for her money. It seemed to the people